The most dangerous child in the known realm was crouched in the dirt, collecting seashells. Not the silver eyes that caught light like mirrors, not the way the tide pulled back whenever he laughed, not even the 3 wolves at the tree-lined stone, still watching him the way sentinels watch a throne. The thing that would undo Ren Vale was the seashells. Because Theo was 5 years old, arranged them by color, with his small tongue pressed between his teeth in concentration, utterly unbothered by the 12 armed soldiers who had just surrounded him in a semicircle of drawn steel and imperial banners. He does not understand, Ren thought, already moving, already placing hers between her son and every blade in that courtyard. He does not understand that they came here to take him. Citizen, Captain Aldrich Frost's voice was gravel dragged over iron. He did not look at Ren. He looked at Theo the way a collector looks at a stolen artifact. With recognition, with appetite, with the calm of a man who has already decided the outcome. You are harboring an unregistered wolf child, displaying Class 4 anomalous abilities. This constitutes a crown violation under Statute 89 of the Ashvale Compact. Ren said nothing. She stood. You have 60 seconds to surrender the child into Crown custody. Frost's gauntlet hand moved to his sword hilt, deliberate, practiced, designed to make women with no pack and no name understand exactly how small they were. After that, we are authorized to use whatever force the situation requires. Behind her, Theo set down a seashell. Mama, he said, in the perfectly reasonable voice of a child who has noticed something mildly interesting. That man is counting. 50 seconds. If you are new here, do not move. Do not skip ahead. What happens in the next 4 minutes will change everything you think you know about who holds the power in this story. Stay with me. Ren did not look back at her son. She could not. Because if she looked at him, at his silver eyes, his careful arrangements, the small serious furrow between his brows, she would break. And she had not survived 5 years in the dark by breaking in the light. She looked at Frost instead. You will want, she said quietly, to wait for your king. Frost blinked just once. The gates opened. She had not always been no one. Once, Ren Vale had a pack number. A bunk in the eastern dormitory of Pack Thornmere's lower quarter. A tin cup with her initials scratched in the bottom so no one would steal it at mealtimes. The small things that told you that you existed, that you belonged to something larger than that the world had registered your presence and decided, they took all of it on a Tuesday. It's no ceremony. No Tribemere had simply handed her a piece of folded paper across a wooden desk without looking up from his ledgers and said, you have until sundown. The paper was a formal expulsion notice. At the bottom in red ink was the reason: unsanctioned conception, no registered mate on file, conduct unbecoming a pack member. She had been 90 years old. She had been 8 weeks pregnant. She had been standing in wet boots because it'd been raining for 3 days straight, and the dormitory roof leaked directly over her bunk. She had not cried, even then. She had taken the paper, folded smaller, and put it in her pocket. Then she had walked out in the rain and kept walking until Thornmere's borders were behind her and the tree line swallowed her whole. Grayfen was not a destination. It was the place she stopped when her feet gave out. A fishing village at the edge of the Ashvale realm's eastern boundary, so far from the capital that the King's Law arrived here approximately 6 months late, and usually by accident. The people were rough and salt, worn and profoundly uninterested in anyone's business but their own. When Ren peered at the harbor master's door, soaking wet, visibly pregnant, with nothing but a canvas pack and an expression that dared him to ask questions, he had handed her a key to an empty storage shed and told her the fish gutting started at dawn. She had taken the key. She had been at the docks before dawn. That was how 5 years worked. You did not think about 5 years. You thought about tomorrow's tide. You thought about whether the net was mended well enough to last another week. You thought about the price of salt, fish at the market, and whether it was enough to cover the rent on the 2-room cottage she had graduated to when Theo turned 1 and started pulling the storage shed's door off its hinges in his sleep. You did not think about silver eyes, and a voice like a storm front, and the single night that had rewrit everything. She allowed us to think about it exactly once a year, on Theo's birthday, after he was asleep. She would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea and a picture she had torn from a discarded gazette, a formal portrait, grainy with poor printing, the kind they distributed across the realm after new Alpha King's coronation. She would look at it as long as it took to drink the tea, then would coo, fold it away, back behind the loose brick above the fireplace, and not look at it again for another 12 months. It was the only discipline that had ever truly cost her something, because the night had not been nothing. She needed to be honest with us about that, at least in the privacy of her own skull. Had not been a snake, born of foolishness or desperation. She had been 20 years old, newly expelled, picking up laborer's work on the outer edge of a territory she did not belong to, and he had come through without his banners, without his title announced, traveling the borderlands the way powerful men sometimes did when they needed to remember what the world looked like from the ground. She had not known who he was until 3 days later, when a gazette blew against her legs in the wind and his face stared up at her from the mud. By then the bond had already happened. By then she had already felt it, that crack guard recognition, that electrical rewiring behind her sternum, the primal certainty that arrived not in her mind but in her blood. This one. This is the one. And then it had simply stopped between one breath and the next. The bond had gone quiet, as if someone had pressed a thumb over a candle flame. She had zoomed in the terror logic of a girl, with no pack and no standing, that had been one-sided, that she had felt a bond that he had not, that the universe had made one of its crueler jokes at her expense. She had never once considered that someone had taken it from her deliberately. The Easter egg was this: 5 times in 5 years, on the night of Theo's birthday, a white wolf had appeared at the edge of the Grafen forest, enormous, pale as sea foam, sitting perfect still at the tree line with its silver eyes fixed on the cottage window, where the light burned late. By morning, it was always gone. Wren had told her it was a coincidence. She had told her this with the same grim discipline she applied to the photograph behind. She had told her this so many times that it had almost started to feel true. Almost. The gates of Grafen's courtyard were old cedar wood, salt-warped and iron, hinged the kind that groaned on a still day just from the weight of their own age. They had never once in 5 years made Wren flinch. They opened silently now. That was the first wrong thing. Cedar that old did not move without sound. And yet the left gate swung inward on its rusted hinges without so much as a whisper, as if the wood itself had decided that announcing this particular arrival was above its station. The second wrong thing was the soldiers. Frost's 12 men, veterans, hard-eyed and deliberate in the particular way of men who had seen enough violence to stop being surprised by it, went absolutely rigid, not at attention. Rigidity born of attention was a performance. This was something older, something the body did before the mind caught up. Every spine straight, every chin dropped, every hand removed from every weapon, with the careful reverence of men suddenly aware they had been holding steel in a cathedral. The third wrong thing was the silence. Theo stopped arranging his seashells. Wren had never, not once in 5 years, seen her son stop mid-arrangement. It was his particular obsession, the ordering of small things, the making of patterns from chaos. He completed arrangements the way other children completed breaths, automatic, non-negotiable. Looked up, his silver eyes fixed on the expression Wren had no name for, because she had never seen it on a 5-year-old's face before. It was not fear. It was not excitement. It was the look of someone recognizing a thing they had only ever known in theory. Then Calum Draven Ashvey stepped through the gate, and Wren forgot how to count. knowledge. She had seen the portrait 100 times. She had memorized it with the hateful precision of a woman who knew she should destroy it and could not make her do so. She knew the jaw, the scar through the left brow, the ing-black hair. She knew the formal set of his shoulders and the cold, careful nothing of expression in official portraiture. She was not prepared for the reality of him. He was taller than the portrait suggested. Broader, he wore black field armor rather than ceremonial dress. A man who had ridden hard and not stopped to change, which meant he had come here hilf rather than sending word ahead. Which meant something had alarmed him enough to move personally. The hilt of his sword was worn smooth at the grip from use, not decoration. The silver insignia on his chest caught the grey morning light and threw it back doubled. He walked into the courtyard the way weather moves into a valley. Not aggressively, simply, inevitably. The space rearranged itself around him without being asked. His eyes swept the courtyard with the practiced efficiency of a man assessing threats. Frost soldiers, the perimeter, the exits. The woman standing alone between him and the child with her chin up, and her hands loose at her sides, and 5 years of cold iron compressed behind her eyes. He stopped. Not stopped, the way a blade stops against bone. Ren watched it happen, watched the exact moment the wind shift, and carried her scent across the courtyard to him. She saw it in his body, but she saw, in his face, the almost imperceptible tension that moved through him from the ground up, like a fault line registering a tremor, too small for ordinary instruments. His nostrils flared once. His left hand closed at his side, slowly, around nothing. Behind her sternum, something cracked. She had believed for 5 years that the bond was dead. She had built an entire architecture of survival on that belief. Every cold morning, every mended net, every birthday photograph folded away behind a brick. The bond was dead, and she was alone, and that was simply the shape of her life now. It was not dead. It had been buried, and it recognized him. The buried things recognized the pressure of footsteps overhead, with a terrible, reflexive, unstoppable lurch towards the surface. She pressed it down. She pressed it down with everything she had. His eyes moved from her face to the child. Theo had stood up. He stood in the dirt with 2 seashells still in his hands, his silver eyes level and calm, looking at the Alpha King of 47 packs the way he looked, at everything that genuinely interested him, with complete, unhurried attention, as if the rest of the world had simply ceased to require management. The silence in the courtyard was the kind that had weight. Watched Calum look at her son. She watched the color leave his face. She watched something move behind his eyes that she could not name. Something enormous and tectonic, entirely private. A man standing at the edge of a realization so large he could not yet see its borders. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathered in his cheek. He looked at Theo's eyes, his own eyes. The eyes that only the pure ash veil bloodline produced, silver from iris to rim, the kind that court physician document nobles paid genealogists to verify. Theo tilted his head. Then, in the perfectly reasonable voice of a child delivering mild, interesting news, he said, "I know who you are. A beat. Mama has your picture." The crack behind Ren's sternum became a fracture. She felt the bond surface all at once, 5 years of pressure releasing in a single terrible moment, and she watched Calum Ashvale go so dangerously, irreversibly absolute still that even the soldiers stopped breathing. His eyes moved to her face. She had nowhere left to go. Mara Vane had excellent timing. That was the thing Ren would remember afterward. Not the soldiers, not the chains, not even the sound they made when the cold silver touched his mother's wrists. What she would remember was how precisely Mira had chosen her moment, how she'd waited until the bond surfaced in Calum's eyes, until the exact second he was most exposed, most human, most off, balanced, and then stepped forward. Crimson cloak, silver council insignia, the smile of a woman who had been holding a winning hand for 6 years, and had simply been waiting for the right table. "My king," Mira's voice was warm, professionally warm. The warmth of a fireplace in a room with no exits. She moved in the courtyard with the unhurried grace of someone who had already won. Forgive the disruption. I took the liberty of accompanying Captain Frost when the reports reached the capital. Given the scented nature of the situation, her gold eyes moved to Wren. Stayed there. I thought legal counts present would be prudent. Calum did not look at her. He was still looking at Wren. This woman, Mira continued, her tone shifting in the precise of formal accusation, is Wren Vale, formerly of Packthorne expelled years ago for unsanctioned conception. She has been residing in non-affiliated territory without Pack registration, without Crown documentation, and without submit the child to mandatory ability assessment as required by Compact Statute 40 Fower. She paused, let it land. Furthermore, given the child's physical characteristics, which I think we can all observe, there is significant legal basis for the charge of deliberate concealment of royal lineage, which, under Ashvale law, carries a sentence of enough. One word. Calum's voice was quiet. That was the thing about genuine. It did not need volume. It simply needed to exist, and everything else arranged itself accordingly. Smiled. Did not stop. Carries a sentence of no less than 20 years in Crown detention. She lifted one hand, a small elegant gesture, and looked at Frost. Captain. Frost moved. He was across the courtyard in 4 strides. Wren turned. She was already turning, already putting hers between him and Theo. But Frost was a soldier, and she was a fish. Gutter, and the math of that was brutal and immediate. He caught her left wrist, twisted. She felt the joint scream and refused to make a sound. The silver chain came from his belt in a single practice motion and snapped around both her wrists before she could pull free. The cold hit her like a blade. Silver suppressed wolf blood. She had enough wolf blood, just enough, the thin inherited trace of a half-shifted grandeur 3 generations back, that the silver did not neutralize her, simply hurt, constantly, comprehensively, the kind of pain that narrowed the world down to its own frequency and made everything else static. She did not make a sound. Theo made a sound. It was not a cry. Not exactly. It was something below crying. Something that came from a frequency. Wren had only heard from him twice before, both times in the depths of nightmare. Both times that had ended with the fishing boats in the harbor straining against their ropes in possible wind. He said, "Mama," and the sky answered. The clouds that had been sitting grey and mild over Grayfen all morning simply compressed, folded inward, darkened from grey to the specific purple, black of a sky that has decided to mean it. The temperature dropped 8 degrees in the span of 4 seconds. Wren felt it on her skin, even through the silver's interference. The harbor master's wind bell, which had been silent all morning, began to ring in short, violent bursts. The 3 wolves at the tree line rose from their haunches simultaneously and began to pace. Frost looked up at the sky. His grip on Wren's chain loosened by a fraction. That fraction was not enough. Remarkable, Mira had not moved. She was watching Theo with the focused interest of a taxonomist who has just identified a new and extremely valuable specimen. Class 4 was a conservative assessment. Frost secured the child as well. Calum moved. Later, Wren would not be able to describe it with any precision. She would say only that one moment Frost was reaching for her son, and the next moment the courtyard was a different place entirely. The air pressure changed, physically changed, the way it changed at the epicenter of a lightning strike, that sudden, dense compression that made your ears ring and your sinuses ache and some animal part of your brain begin calculating distances to the nearest cover. Calum Ashvey released his alpha aura, not incrementally, not with the measured, tactical deployment of a man exercising power in a public setting. He released it the way a dam releases water when the structure fails, all of it instantly. The full weight of the most dominant alpha in 47 packs, pressing down on the courtyard like a fizzle force. Frost stopped moving. Every soldier stopped moving. 3 of them went to their knees without appearing to decide to do so. Their bodies simply made the calculation independent of their minds and reached the only logic conclusion available. Down. Frost lasted 4 seconds longer than anyone else. Ren watched him fight it, watched his legs shaking, watched the sweat break across his forehead, watched his hand release her chain link by link as his motor control lost the argument with something far older than training. Then he went down too, hard both knees, his sword arm dropped to his side as if the tendons had been cut. The silver chain fell from Ren's wrists. She caught it before it hit the ground. Old reflex. You did not leave silver lying near a child with wolf blood. Calum walked forward. Short sentence now. Because step. Each breath. A period. A period. The world was operating in short declarative units, and there was no room for subordinate clauses. He stopped in front of Frost. He looked down at him. You chained her. His voice had not changed volume. It had changed texture entirely. It was the texture of something that had decided. In front of the child. You chained her in front of her son. Frost opened his mouth. Do not speak. Calum crouched to Frost's eye level. This was somehow more frightening than towering over him. You are going to stay exactly where you are. You are going to think very carefully about every decision that brought you to this courtyard today. And when I am finished here, you are going to answer every question because the alternative. He tilted his head. Fractionally. Is that? I stopped being calm. He stood. He turned to Mira. The warm professional smile was gone. In its place was something Ren had never seen on Mira Vane's face before, in all the Gazette photographs and official portraits and council announcements she had catalogued over 5 years of careful watching. Uncertainty. Mira's voice was almost gentle. Almost. How long have you known? The courtyard held its breath. Mira's gold eyes moved once to Theo, then back to the king. And in that single triangulated glance, Ren saw it. The calculation, the reassessment, the rapid internal accounting of a woman who had been running a very long game and had just realized the board had changed. My king, I was acting in the crown's best. How long? Silence. A crack of thunder split the sky directly overhead. Theo had stopped crying. He was standing perfectly still, both seashells still his hands, watching Calum with those silver eyes. The storm held, waiting, it seemed, for the king's verdict. Mira Vane said nothing. That was answer enough. The storm did not break. It held suspended overhead like a sentence waiting for its period, while Calum Ashvey stood in the center of the courtyard and looked at the woman who had spent 6 years dismantling his life from the inside. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he turned to the 2 senior soldiers still standing, the ones with enough dominant blood to have stayed, upright through the aura release, barely, and spoke in the flat, precise tone of a man dictating to a scribe. Countess Mira Vane is to be placed in silver restraints, full suppression grade. She is to be held under crown arrest pending formal tribunal on the following charges. He did not look at Mira while he listed them. He looked at the middle distance, the way men look when they are reciting something they have already decided with finality and do not need to perform for an audience. Deliberate destruction of a sanctioned mate bond through prohibited alchemical interference, falsification of crown registry documents, conspiracy to conceal royal lineage, unlawful expulsion of a bonded Luna from her filiated pack, a pause, and 6 counts of obstruction of a recognized heir. Mira's composure finally cracked, not dramatically, not in the way of women in stories who collapse and confess and beg. It cracked the way fine porcelain cracks, a single thin fracture from rim to base, the object still technically whole but irrevocably compromised. Her chin lifted, her gold eyes went cold and bright. You cannot prove. I have your correspondence with the Thornmere Alpha. Calum's voice did not change. I have the alchemist's ledger. I have 6 years of falsified bond registry entries with your seal at the bottom of every page." He looked at her now, directly, for the first time since she had stepped into the courtyard. "I have been building this case for 4 months, Mira. Since the moment my bond began returning, and I could not account for why it had been absent." The silver restraints went on. Mara Vane, Countess, council member, the most politically sophisticated operator in the Ashvale court, said nothing more. She allowed her to be led to the courtyard, and secured there with the rigid dignity of a woman who had already begun calculating her next move from inside a cell. Frost was stripped of his insignia on the spot. Calum did not make a speech about it. He simply removed the captain's pin from Frost's collar, held it for a moment, and placed it in the dirt. The demotion was complete in the time it took to perform those 2 actions. Frost remained on his knees. He would stay there until told otherwise. He understood this without being told. The courtyard was very quiet. The remaining soldiers stood at genuine attention now, not the paralyzed rigidity of aura suppression, but the deliberate stillness of men recalibrating their understanding of what this mission had actually been and what it meant for their continued service. Several of them were not looking at Mara. Several of them were not looking at Frost. They were looking at Theo, who had sat back down in the dirt and resumed arranging his seashells with the serene focus of a child who had processed all available information and returned to the task that mattered. The storm overhead began slowly to release, not all at once. In increments, the purple-black lightening to charcoal, the charcoal to gray, the gray beginning to show the pale suggestion of light behind it, as if the sky, like the courtyard, was waiting to take its cue from the boy. Ren stood where she had been standing since the chain fell from her wrists. She had not moved. She was not sure her legs would carry her if she tried. The silver burn had faded to a dull ache across both wrists. The skin there reddened in distinctive latter pattern of suppression, grade contact. She was holding the chain still, that old reflex. Protect the child from silver. Protect the child, and she became aware of this only when her knuckles began to ache from the grip. She set the chain down carefully. She straightened, and she found Calum Ashvale standing 4 feet away, looking at her. He was a disaster. Blood on his left gauntlet, from where he had physically removed Frost's restraint from her wrists. The chains had cut his palm, and he had not appeared to notice. There was road dust in his hair from hard riding. The silver insignia on his chest had taken a dent at some point in the last 10 minutes that she genuinely could not account for. He looked like a man who had been conducting a war on multiple fronts and had only just now stopped moving long enough for the damage to catch up with him. He looked at her wrists. The lattice burns, the reddened skin. Something moved across his face that was not an expression she had a word for. Too raw for a man of his discipline. To have intended it to be visible, which meant he was not, in this precise moment, managing him at all. Her name in his voice, for the first time, not citizen, not the woman. Her name, spoken the way you speak something you have been turning over in your mouth for a long time, without knowing what it was. She said nothing. What was there to say? She had spent 5 years building a silence so complete it had its own architecture, its own load, berry walls. She did not know how to dismantle it in a courtyard in 4 seconds with her wrists still burning. Calum Ashvale, Alpha King of 47 packs, the most powerful supernatural authority in the known realm. The man whose portrait she had hidden behind a brick for 5 years because she could not make her burn it, went to his knees. Not a stumble, not a collapse. A deliberate, chosen irreverent, both knees in the dirt of a fishing village courtyard, armor and all, road dust and blood, and the full weight of everything he was arranged into an act of submission so complete that behind her the soldiers made a sound that was not quite a breath and not quite a word. He did not reach for her. He placed his hands open on his thighs, palms up, The gesture of an alpha present him to his Luna, ancient, formal, and in this context so devastating. In its sincerity, that Ren felt something in her chest that had been clenched for 5 years simply release. I did not know. His voice was low. Rough in a way it had not been during the sentencing, during the aura release, during any of the controlled precision of the last 20 minutes. This what was underneath all of that. I need you understand that I did know. What she did the bond, what she did to you, what she did to you. What she cost both. What she cost us both. Ren's eyes were burning. She had not cried in 5 years. She had made this a point of personal policy, with the same grim discipline she applied to everything. Crying was a luxury that required safety, and she had not been safe in 5 years, and so she had simply stopped. She was not safe now exactly, but she was not alone now either. A small warm weight pressed against her left side. Theo, he had abandoned the seashells. He was leaning against her hip with one hand and reaching toward Calum with the other, not hesitantly, not with the caution of a child approaching a stranger, but with the absolute matter of fact confidence of a boy who had decided a thing and was acting on it. He placed his small hand on Calum's shoulder. The storm broke gently, a soft, unhurried rain that fell straight down in the windless air and felt less like weather than like something exhaling. Ren's eyes filled. She let them. They did not leave Grafen that day. Calum made that decision within the first hour, quietly and without consultation, in the manner of a man who has recalibrated his priority and is no longer interested in the schedule he arrived with. The delegation would stay. The horses would rest. The paperwork, the mountains of crown documentation that attended any formal recognition of royal lineage, would begin here, in this salt-worn village at the edge of the known realm, because this was where it had happened, and that mattered. Ren's wrists were treated by the delegation's physician, a compact, serious woman named Aldrin who worked without commentary and applied the silver, burn salve with the efficiency of someone who had seen this particular injury too many times. Theo sat on the examination table beside his mother and held her hand throughout and informed Aldrin with great seriousness that he had learned to make the rain stop, but had not yet learned to make it go somewhere specific. Aldrin said that was very advanced for his age. Theo considered this and returned to holding his mother's hand. The formal recognition ceremony was simple by crown standards, which meant it was still, by any ordinary measure, staggering. Calum stood in the center of Grafen's harbor square. The same square where Ren had sold fish for 5 years, where she had mended nets in the dark before dawn, where she had carried Theo on her back through winter markets and told anyone who asked that his eyes were a hereditary condition, and read the proclamation hymn. His voice carried across the square and out over the water without effort. Theo Ashvale, first of his name, recognized heir to the Ashvale throne, crown prince of the eastern and western reaches. His lineage entered in the royal registry with immediate effect, backdated to the date of his birth, the record amended and sealed under the king's personal insignia. Then Calum reached in his coat and produced a second document. Ren Vale, recognized Luna of the Ashvale pack, bonded mate to the Alpha King. The bond suppression declared unlawful and its restoration formally acknowledged under ancient law. Her expulsion from Pack Thornmere voided in its entirety. Her name, her full name, Ren Vile Ashvale, entered into the crown registry beside his. He did not place a crown on her head. That ceremony would come later, in the capital, with the full court assembled and the formal traditions observed. What he did instead was take both her hands, carefully, over the faded lattice burns, and look at her in the gray morning light with the expression of a man who found something he did not know he was looking for, and intends, with every resource available to him, never to lose it again. Later, he said quietly, for her alone, I am going to spend a considerable amount of time apologizing. Ren looked at him. Later, she said, the people of Grafen were compensated. not with the impersonal disbursement of crown funds to a village account, but personally. Calum walked the harbour with the harbour master and listened to 5 years of Ren's history in this place and compensate accordingly. The woman who had given Ren the storage shed key, the fisherman who had covered her market stall during Theo's first illness, the school teacher who had taught Theo his letters and never once mentioned his eyes to anyone. Each of them received a formal letter of crown commendation and a sum that would not change their lives, but would make the next 5 years considerably less difficult. Small things, the small things that told you that you had been seen. Theo stood at the harbor's edge as the afternoon light came through the breaking clouds and threw silver across the water. He had one seashell in his hand, a single spiral one he had kept from the morning's arrangement, slipped into his pocket during everything that followed. He was looking out at the water with the contemplative focus of a child processing a great deal. Calum stood beside him. They stood together in silence for a long moment, the king and the prince, the father and the son, identical silver eyes watching the same horizon. Then Theo said, "Are we going to live in the big palace now?" Calum said, "Yes." Theo considered this with appropriate gravity. "Can I bring my shells?" "Every last one." Theo nodded. Satisfied, he slipped his hand into his father's, and they stood there until Ren came to find them. And then the three of them stood together while the last of the storm clouds pulled apart and the graphen sky went clear and clean all the way to the horizon. Mira Vane is in chains tonight. Her trial begins in the capital within the fortnight, and the charges against her carry a sense that will end everything she spent 6 years building. But here is the question I want you to sit with, because no one in this story has asked it yet. Who told her about the bond in the first place? Who told a council member which alchemist to find, which registry to falsify, which pack alpha to bribe? Mira Vane is many things, but she did not build this conspiracy alone. Someone gave her the blueprint, and that someone is still in the capital, still at court, still close to the king. Tell me in the comments whose you think it was. If this story found tonight, do not leave quietly. Like this video, share it with some who needs it, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. The truth is still unraveling, and we are just getting started.